G'day everyone. If you get to listen to this episode before Tuesday, December 6th, 2016, I'd like to invite you to a free online music business lecture I'm hosting called How to Successfully Obtain Sponsorships and Endorsements for Your Band, Your Artist, or Your Music Industry Business. I've been very successful in this area over many years now, and I would love to share with you the strategies that I've developed that have helped me achieve this. And of course, it's 100% free. So again, it's Tuesday, December 6th, 2016, and you can register for free and receive all the details at musicbusinessfacts.net/sponsorship. I hope to speak with you then.
It's tough because the lines get so blurred. Like I was saying earlier, sometimes people also think publicists do radio, or they also think they do a bit of management, or they also think they do booking. But really what a publicist is doing is getting you press and coaching you on that press that you're getting. So that's really their job, and anything else is kind of a bonus.
Welcome to the Music Business Facts Podcast, where successful music industry experts share their industry secrets that will help you take your music career to the next level.
G'day ladies and gentlemen, Rodney here, and thank you so much for joining me on the show. I really appreciate you investing your time with me. You know, one of the many things that I love about podcasting is that it provides a great platform to connect with other people, and I really do recommend that any of you who would like to try and build authority in any niche, obviously including music, should start a podcast. Anyhow, today the wonderful person that I've been able to connect with is music publicist and PR strategist Angela Mastrogiacomo. I hope I got your name right, Angela. And Angela's from Muddy Paw PR, so you should check out her services at muddypawpr.com. Paw as in dog paw, P-A-W. Now, Angela is an absolutely wonderful person, and I really enjoyed speaking with her. We had a really awesome chat about the incredibly important topic of music publicity, surprise, surprise. And as I often do, I threw in a few tricky and personal questions for Angela, and in this interview she gave me some awesome and really honest answers. She also really provides a fantastic look into the world of what it's like to be a music publicist, and gives some great advice to any people when it comes to using the services of a publicist. Now, it has been said that without publicity, a terrible thing happens. Nothing. And so that's why this podcast is really, really important for anybody looking to get into the super hyper competitive world that is the music business. It really is such an important component of the music industry puzzle. And so I really hope you enjoy my conversation with Angela Mastrogiacomo from Muddy Paw PR. Enjoy. So, Angela, thank you so much for joining me on the show today. I really appreciate you. Well, it's 6 p.m. for you, 8 a.m. for me. I really appreciate you, like I said, giving up your dinner time to talk to me. And it's been a long time. We've been back and forth with emails, but finally here we are. Thank you for joining me on the show.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Angela, for any of my listeners who don't know who you are or what you do, would you mind just start off by telling us a little bit about yourself personally, who you are and what you're up to, and then a little bit about your music business?
Yeah, absolutely. So first and foremost, I am a dog mother. My dog's actually sitting with me right now, which is actually the inspiration behind the name of my PR company, which is Muddy Paw PR. Mm-hmm. So I first got into the industry about 7-ish years ago now. And that's when I started my music blog, Infectious Magazine. And it's kind of a fun story. I got to a venue early. I was there to see this band that I love called Amberlin. And I got there early and I saw this band called The Coming Week, which is just this tiny local band out of Providence, Rhode Island. And they blew me away. And I was like, I've got to interview them. But I was like, well, how do you do that? So I was like, I'll just start a blog. And that's kind of how it all started. And then after 5 or so years of doing that, I started Muddy Paw, and and now I'm still going strong with both of them.
That's fantastic. And I always, push the envelope with my guests, Angela, and I guess I do that because I want to try and extract as much honesty from you. And like I said, this show is called Music Business Facts. A lot of my students and some of my listeners would potentially be interested in starting a PR firm. And I just wanted to ask you the private and personal question, is it a reasonable living doing this in the music industry where often you hear that, there's no money in it and you can't make money? Would you mind shedding any light or commenting on that rather?
Yeah, Yeah, not at all. That's a great question. You're the first person that's ever asked me that, and I'm so glad you have. It is my sole job, so I do make my living off of it. However, it's not a glamorous living by any means. I'm working all the time. It was not surprising to me when I found out that PR was in the top 10 most stressful jobs, because most days you do kind of want to pull your hair out. Even when you love your clients, there are still always moments. So I guess the short answer to your question is, it's tough. It's a yes and no. Yes, because I do make my living off of it. But it's not without its struggles. Like I said, I mean, I spent the first couple of years working like nonstop. I've learned to ease off a bit now, but it's tough. Like, you can make a living, but you could probably make a living, or you could probably make more money somewhere else that was less stressful. So you really, really have to love what you're doing, because it really tests you in every way, in ways that you didn't even know you could be tested. And I've only been doing this for 3 years. And there are times when I'm like, I didn't even know I had that part of me in me, whether it's a strength or a weakness. So it's tough. It's not for the faint of heart. That's for sure. And I think nobody should ever be in this business if they want to get rich, because it's probably not going to happen.
Yeah, well, look, thanks for being so honest with that. And I guess that's very true for a lot of people in the arts, isn't it? That you're doing it for a labour of love, you're doing it for your passion, you're doing it for your love of, in this instance, the music. So, yeah, thanks for being so honest. I appreciate that. Yeah, and it's tough, too, because, I mean, from a publicist perspective, what we charge and what I know that other publicists charge, it's very fair for the amount of work that's going into it, if not possibly undercharging. But the thing is, it's still such a lot of money to bands. When you're asking, say, like between $500 and $700 a month for a campaign, it's still a lot of money. So it's this kind of war where the artist never has enough money to pay you, but you do need PR to grow a career in music, and at the same time you're never quite charging enough, but also they can't even pay what you're currently charging. It's just this constant kind of battle. I think it's tough. It's definitely tough. No, well, again, thanks for the transparency, and again, I really appreciate you telling us the facts, because I think a lot of people, especially younger people, in my experience, they come into the music industry and they think it's all about kind of Beyonce, Jay-Z, and you're going to be they'll be disappointed. Yeah, but that's cool. So are you mainly working with bands and singer-songwriters, Angela, or are you also, do you do PR for, promoters and booking agents and stuff like that, or where's most of your work coming from? Most of our work is definitely from the artist side of things. We've done a little bit of PR outside of that. Like, we did PR for the Music Launch Summit that you were a part of. So that was kind of one of our first, journeys into the non-artist world. I would like to work a lot more within the industry side of things. I would love to work promoting like labels and festivals and online summits and things like that. So that's kind of where we're heading in the next year, is to start bringing on more of those clients, just because I think it would be fun. I mean, it's kind of fun to keep that, mix it up a little bit, and it's just very different. It's similar enough to the artist side, but it's different because you're working with other professionals versus artists, and those are two very different people. Yeah, sure. And we haven't mentioned, Angela, where are you and Muddy Paw based? Oh, yeah. I kind of bounce around. I'm from the Boston area. I'm in Toronto right now. I spend a lot of time in Toronto. But yeah, home is the Boston area. Yeah, okay. So I was looking at my podcast stats yesterday, and I'm about 40% USA now. Wow. 50% Australia, and then the rest is sort of from like the UK and Canada and the rest of the world. But what I'm trying to get at with that is, could you help, for instance, an Australian band promote their record? I mean, obviously you could, probably in a different territory, but I'm just trying to get a vibe of, if there was an Aussie independent artist listening to me and you talk today, how could you perhaps help them? What are some, give us a sales pitch. Yeah, we've worked with a couple artists that are from like Australia, the UK, or even Canada. And it's actually it's interesting. It's beneficial if you're looking to get more into blogs that tend to be based in the States. So it's kind of funny, like bands in the States don't think of it this way, but whenever I've worked with a band in, say, Australia or Canada,
country, like blogs that cover just artists from that country seem to be really prevalent, whereas it seems like blogs that are based in the States, they just kind of cover everyone. So what we would do, for instance, if we had an Australian artist coming in, is we do a mix of some outreach would go to blogs that, for instance, just covered Australia or just covered whatever city they were in. But then we would also reach out to the rest of our contacts, because our contacts are really strong in North America. So it ends up being kind of a nice mix where you get a little bit of exposure in like your hometown and your own country, but then you also get this much wider reach to all these blogs that are based in and have strong readership in the States, which I found ends up being really appealing from people that are not from the States, that they really want to break into that market. And so we're able to help them do that, because that is where the majority of our contacts really lie.
And you kept referring back to blogs. Is blogs the main kind of avenue now, or platform for artists to kind of get recognised that you're trying to bring together? I mean, is there still much traditional media with magazines and radio stations and things like that? Or?
Well, radio is a whole nother beast. So if for a band that's looking into getting onto radio, they're actually going to be looking more at like a radio tracker than a publicist, because Publicist will do a little bit of like college radio outreach, especially if a band is going on tour. But when bands think radio, that's actually not PR. That's more radio tracking. And I always recommend that for when you're about to go on a tour. I think that's kind of when you get the most bang for your buck there. But yeah, we work, it's primarily online. I mean, there are some, like here in Canada, there are some PR companies that will do like morning breakfast shows and things like that. But for the most part, yeah, it's really evolved so that it is just blogs and podcasts tend to be where the majority of placements go. I love print. I love print personally, and I'm still excited every now and again when we get a print feature, just because, like in my heart, it's like it's print, you know. But but yeah, it is primarily just digital now. And
Angela, is Muddy Paw genre specific? Like, I mean, could you effectively promote a country and western act as good as you could a rap or hip hop act or a death metal grindcore band? Is there different challenges with different genres?
There is. I like how you covered basically every end of the spectrum with each of those examples. We are sort of genre specific. Like we tend to work primarily with bands that are either alternative rock, pop punk, singer-songwriter, folk, because right now that's where our connections are.
Sure.
So for instance, like we have worked with hip hop and we've worked with singer-songwriters that have a country lean. But for instance, like if you are a super country artist and you come to us and none of our publicists have those contacts, we'll just refer you to another publicist. Like we're not just going to take your money and do a terrible job. It's really important that we have those connections that can help you. So yeah, it is. But at the same time, you know, if we, for instance, ended up bringing on a publicist that was like really, really good in metal and had all these metal connections, then we would start taking on metal artists. So it's really just about where we think that you can get those connections. But for me and the publicists that we have now, those are kind of our, you know, I don't want to say favorite genres, but they are the genres we tend to lean towards. And because it's so important that we're passionate about the music we promote, it does kind of inadvertently become genre specific.
And I suppose from a business perspective, you kind of have to do that, just because if you don't niche down, you'd be spread too thin. Would that be a fair enough statement? Yeah,
it's pretty interesting because I think bands make this mistake too when they're branding themselves, where they think, well, I'll just appeal to everybody and whatever sticks, that works. But, you know, even on the business side, if we do that, it doesn't necessarily work because, you know, if we have, it's probably really alarming for a hip hop artist to come to us and look at who we've worked with and be like, these are all pop punk. And be like, have you even worked with any hip hop artists, you know? And I'm sure that would be the same vice versa. If we had like an all hip hop roster, then a punk band came to us, it would probably just be confusing because they would think you probably aren't going to be aiming for the outlets that I want. So yeah, I think it is important to really zero in on that.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, that's great to hear. And here's a tough question for you, and I've asked a couple of other publicists this, and they've kind of cringed a bit, but they've given me honest answers. What do you do, Angela, when your job is to promote, you know, somebody's music? What do you do when they're bringing you their checkbook and they're saying, here's our money, Angela, we want you to promote us, but you know that their music's crap or not quite up to standard? What is that? I mean,
it's tough.
Yeah,
I mean, the moral thing is that you do always have to say no. I mean, It is tough because especially when you're starting off, and like we were talking about before, where every dollar really does count in this industry.
Sure.
It's tough to watch the money just walk away, but morally you can't do it. And the other thing is, even if you're not a moral person, you have to think about the longevity of the business, because if I take on an artist that I know is just not ready, and I'm trying to push that to my contacts, then they're going to be like, wait a minute, this is awful. And if I do that enough times, they're going to be like, we can't trust Angela anymore because she's sending us this awful music. So It's really my reputation on the line as well.
And you can't put a price on your reputation, can you? I mean, I always say it takes a long time to develop it and can be shot overnight. So I understand that.
Yeah, it's true.
So what do you say to those artists? Do you just be honest and say, look, I think that you need to go away and, work on the production or work on the songwriting, or... It's tough because artists are so sensitive, right? Ego.
I am too. It is. It's, oh gosh, there's so much ego in this industry. But yeah, it's, if I think I can help them in another way, I will. Like, we have these other services. One of them is this artist development sheet where we will look at an artist's social media presence and their online presence, and we'll basically say, like, this is what you're doing right, this is what you're doing wrong. And then we also send them a questionnaire that asks them about their, kind of gets an idea of their branding and their goals, and we kind of work with them on all that. To sort of tidy them up, and help them get to that point. So if I think that is something that will help them, I might say, well, you're not ready for a full PR campaign right now, but we do offer this artist development thing, and here's what it does, and it might help you. And sometimes that works out and it ends up being a really good fit. But it's also just all about the vibes. I mean, somebody could also have great music, but if I feel like they're going to be awful to work with, or we're just not vibing well, it's not worth taking the money and working with them, because it's just going to be a headache for everyone involved. And that's something that took me a couple tries to learn, because I was really optimistic. I was like, it's fine. But then, some people just don't vibe well, or sometimes expectations are just out of line with reality. And those can be kind of impossible situations to navigate.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Now, once again, Angela, thanks for being so honest and sharing it. It's really great to have such a an insight into what you do and this crazy business. Angela, you've called your company Muddy Paw PR, but then earlier you referred to yourself as a publicist. Is there a difference, or can you help me and the listeners understand the difference between, say, you've got PR, you've got promo, you've got publicity? Do you have any sort of set definitions of what those differences are?
I mean, I think they're pretty similar. I think where the difference comes in is when people think that like PR and marketing are the same thing, which is something that I thought until I was in PR, and then I realized no, they're very different. But yeah, I mean, it's pretty similar. I mean, as far as, it's interesting too, because PR in the music industry, or PR in other industries, doesn't really translate to PR in the music industry. They are, I've found, very, very different. Like the basics are the same, but everything else is different. And so for PR in the music industry, kind of the quick way to say it, I guess, is that, we're aiming to get you things like album reviews or interviews or guest blogs or just anything that will kind of get the buzz out about you. I think sometimes people confuse. It's tough because the lines get so blurred. Like I was saying earlier, sometimes people also think publicists do radio, or they also think they do a bit of management, or they also think they do booking. But really what a publicist is doing is getting you press and coaching you on that press that you're getting. So that's really their job. And anything else is kind of a bonus. Yeah. I mean, yeah, to put it bluntly, I guess.
No, cool. I missed a little bit of that, and I just want to go back and press you on this. You said that there's a difference between PR and marketing, that a lot of people don't know what the difference is. Can you quantify that?
To be honest, marketing is still a mystery to me. But the simplest way I can put it is that where PR is getting you press, marketing is more about sales, which is another huge misconception. Is people think they hire a publicist, their sales are going to go up. That's not PR. That's marketing. Right. So marketing is to do with sales and ads. Everything you see on Mad Men, That's marketing. It's not PR. So that's kind of the simplest way to explain the differences, as I understand them.
Yeah, cool. No, thanks. I once had a so-called marketing expert tell me that marketing was simply about communicating your brand. And, I know there's lots and lots of different definitions, but no, thanks for sharing your insight to that. Angela, there would be definitely some people I know for a fact listening to this that want to become a publicist. Maybe they're a young student. Can you give them any advice? Or, I spoke to a publicist, in fact, it's going to be released before this interview, and his first one jokingly was, don't do it. Don't do it. So,
I have those days.
I'm sure. But in all seriousness, there would be, there are people that are very passionate about music. They're not necessarily musicians, but they want to be in the music industry. They enjoy writing bios and press releases and, trying to get interviews and all that stuff that you've been talking about. Have you got any advice for these people listening?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, one of the number one things I would say is to start building your connections early. It's kind of the same advice we give to bands, but it really applies to publicists or anyone that wants to do anything in the industry, which is that you have to build those connections, because a publicist without their connections is totally useless. Mm-hmm. So first and foremost, build those and be really vigilant about it, because there's a really high turnover rate in this industry. So you might know somebody at a certain blog today, but in a month they're going to be gone. So you need to build a relationship with multiple writers at that blog, for instance.
Yep.
And then to be really... oh gosh, it sounds so cliche, but to be willing to work really hard. And when I say that, I really, really mean it. I mean, you have to have a really thick skin, and you have to, it's at least for me, it was a lot of navigating muddy waters where I just did not know what I was doing. So my other piece of advice would be to definitely do an internship, because I did not do an internship, and it took me a lot longer to figure things out. So if you can get an internship, virtually is good. Like, we do, all our internships are virtual, but if you can get at least one internship that's in person at a music PR company, I think that would be an amazing experience. I know it sucks because they're usually unpaid, but the time, the 6 months you spend there unpaid is going to save you years of trying to figure it out yourself. And it's also going to help you with that connections thing.
Fantastic. That's awesome advice. Thanks so much for that. And let's touch on that internship thing, because it is a bit of a touchy thing. I know it's, I know it's everywhere, but here in Australia, a lot of people talk about it, and they say, there are some companies that rip people off. And I agree with you. I think that you have to, because this is such a competitive industry and so many people want to get into it, if it's something that you really, really want to do, it's a great way to show a potential employer, someone like yourself, that, I really want to learn this, and I'm prepared to go that extra mile to serve you and to help you and to learn and to have you show me the way. Where am I going with this, Angela? I'm going with, I agree with you that you need to do it. What if someone wanted to get an internship with you and Muddy Paw? Can you give them some hints or tips at how they could impress you and get you to be their guru, if you like? Yeah,
it's there's a couple things. We send our potential interns this sheet to fill out that's kind of asks these questions. I try not to make them typical like job interview questions, but what is it about Muddy Paw? And first of all, flattery goes a long way, right? Like, nepotism in this industry is just it does exist, and it's okay, and so is flattery. Besides the obvious things like make sure you get the person's name right, check for spelling errors, things like that. It's honestly just to be excited. I mean, I will tell you that I would say actually every single intern that we've ever taken on pretty much has had no experience, sometimes at all in the music industry. Sometimes it's just unrelated, but they've been super excited, and it's come through in their emails and stuff. And I think that it's a bit confusing, because in most professions, you're kind of taught to be the opposite. They might want you to be excited about the job, but they kind of want you to be mellow and professional, and you're supposed to have your game face on. And at least for me and the other people in this industry I know, we want you to be excited and outgoing. And especially as a publicist or a publicist in training, you want to at least, I'm not outgoing. I'm terribly introverted, but I certainly try my hardest to be extroverted when I'm talking to clients or hyping people up. So it's just to be excited about the position and to know a little bit about what you're talking about. if you come to me and you're just like, I just want a position in the music industry, and it's very, very easy to tell who looked at the website for 5 minutes and who has actually been following the company, or maybe looked at it for an hour and listened to some of our artists. So if you can kind of show that you've done the research and you've put in the work, then I know you're going to put in the work if you're hired versus if you're just trying to skate by,
Yeah. That's good advice, but it's also pretty common sense, isn't it? Or at least I think it is. And
it should be.
Do your research, listeners. And the next obvious question, Angela, is what's the best way to connect with you? If someone's listening to this and going, I'm liking the sound of this woman and this company, I might like to reach out to her. What's the best way?
That would be great. So my email is just angela@muddypawpr.com. And I had wanted to mention before, too, when you had asked about aspiring publicists, I really regret that I didn't reach out to anyone when I was getting into this. And now I have some great mentors, but I didn't in the beginning. So if anyone is thinking, even of just, being a publicist, even if they just have some questions, I am honestly always thrilled and happy to talk to you about it. So please don't ever be shy about reaching out to me. It would really be my pleasure.
That's awesome, Angela. Thanks so much for that. Angela@muddypawpr.com. Excellent. I'll put that in my show notes as well, guys, over at musicbusinessfacts.com. Angela, you also said you work hard. That's pretty much a given in any self-employed entity, particularly the music industry. Can I ask you another personal question? Could you give us a rundown of how many hours you'd be doing a week? I'm sure you're not just doing the 9 to 5.
I wish I was. No, I would say nowadays it's probably a reasonable 50 or so hours.
Yep.
I would say in the beginning it was not an exaggeration to say 60 or even 70 hours some weeks.
Wow.
In the first year or so, because that first year you're really, really hustling to make connections. If you've made them before, maybe not so much, but you have to. It's hard to get people to give you money and trust you when you have nothing to show for it. So
Yeah.
I spent a lot of time hustling and making connections with bands and industry people, and that's why I'm able to work a little bit less now. And it's thankfully it's not straight through. It's the good part. And the part you have to remind yourself about why you wanted to be self-employed is that, if you want to take a Friday afternoon off and instead work a couple hours Saturday, you can. So I got really, really burnt out about, I would say 6 months or so ago. So these days I am really the last couple months, I just won't even touch my computer on the weekend because I think I don't want to scare people. I think it's just as important to take time off because burnout is very, very real, and it will kill your motivation and your creativity. So it is important to listen to your body and listen to your intuition and give yourself those breaks when you need them.
No, look, that's awesome advice, and I've experienced that myself with the podcast. Generally, when I disappear from releasing episodes for a while, it's because I've just been completely burnt out. And if you're anything like me, you're probably with the bloody smartphone. You're answering emails after dinner and before you go to bed, and when you wake up. At least that's what I'm doing. I know it's not the greatest habit to get into, but
I actually, after I was saying a couple months ago, after that major burnout I had, I took my email off my phone because
Nice.
I was doing the same thing. I would wake up at 2 a.m, be like, who emailed me? It's an addiction. You can't stop. So I had to remove myself from it.
that's cool. Yeah, well, I don't know if I'm brave enough to do that yet, but it's probably something I need to head towards. But yeah, I had to give up my Sundays. I was working, 7 days a week basically, and not watching my little kids grow up. So I had to say, right, Sundays is for the family, and just put everything down. But yeah, I mean, it's just I guess what we're trying to say, that in any business, it's a slug, isn't it? You really have to put the hours in if you hopefully want to have that, what a lot of entrepreneurs want, which is even more time to yourself. But at the start, you're giving less time to yourself. So it's an interesting...
Yeah, and I think it's totally okay as long as it's productive. I think there's this idea, especially in this industry, that the more hours you work, the more serious you are. And on the one hand, that's sort of true, but on the other, it's I feel like it becomes very easy to just constantly work without necessarily having any direction. Versus okay, I have a very strategic plan here, and these are where the hours are going. Because it's okay if you're working towards something, because it's not sustainable. So you can't work like that forever. I don't want to in 5 years still be working this much. That's not why you like start a company and build a team and stuff. It's because you want to be in charge of your life. But for the first few years, the company is definitely in charge of you, it seems.
Yeah. And I love what you're saying about, sort of going through that and making your tasks specific. Have you heard of a motivational guy called Brian Tracy, Angela? He's quite old now. Have you heard of Brian?
I haven't. I'll have to look him up.
Yeah, look, go and check him out on YouTube. His stuff is awesome. I don't know how old he is now, but he's been around like seemingly forever. But he talks about, setting daily goals and waking up in the morning going, these are the things that I must achieve. These are the things that I would like to achieve. These are the things, that would be good to achieve, all that kind of stuff. But I might put a link to him in the show notes too, maybe even chuck some of his motivational videos on. They're all on YouTube now, and I would highly recommend people check out Brian Tracy on that kind of stuff for getting things done. Now, Angela, you also talked about the importance of when you were building your company of building connections. This is a big thing that came up with Steve Palfreman recently at his Music Launch Hub, and I wanted to get your take on it. For anyone listening, and this is for people, I guess, wanting to start any business, what advice have you got or what strategies have you got in order to build those connections? Because this is an area that a lot of people often struggle with, particularly if they're introverted.
Yeah, it's tough. I think people think of networking as this big scary thing. But I kind of just think of it as building friendships, because It really is. I mean, at the core, you're just building friendships. So it's really, really, I don't want to say easy, but it's much easier online now to make these connections. You have things like Twitter where you can follow somebody and you can basically stalk them to find out their interest, right? And then you can appeal to them. I mean, you can connect with them. But I would say, I could go through all the obvious ones, but the best way I've found to really connect with people has actually been talking to them about things that aren't in any way related to music. At least for me, when I meet somebody, if the first thing they're talking to me about is music or business, I love those things. I love talking about those things, but it also instantly puts me in work mode, kind of subconsciously. But if you come up to me and, if anyone looks at my Twitter or my Instagram, I have a huge sweet tooth and I can't not eat dessert. So if you come up to me and you start talking about food or dessert or my dog or something like that, I'm going to be really playful and excited. And it's going to be more of just, regular Angela instead of work Angela. And I think that's where you build bonds the most, is by just being people together. So certainly the obvious things of don't ever approach someone and just shove your music in their face. That's awful. Or don't just shove your agenda in their face. But instead, get to know them. And it kind of goes back to those basics of what is that book, How to Win Friends and Influence People, right? Which he says throughout the whole book, which is basically if you just ask someone about their interests and get them talking, they're going to feel really good about the conversation really at the end, because they've been talking about themselves and people like to talk about themselves, and they'll feel like they've connected to you even if you haven't said a word. So, just kind of find an in and ask them about it and talk to them about it. And don't be afraid to ask people to jump on the phone or meet up in person. I still think those are the best ways to build lasting connections. If you can, is to, do things in person like that.
No, that's great advice, and I totally agree with you. I'd like to share with our listeners today, Angela, how we kind of got talking, because I think that there's a parallel there. You sent me an email, and it was, it came from the blue. I didn't know who you were, and you said to me, I think, something that you really enjoyed my interview with Ariel Hyatt, and who's a rock star in this PR world. And I can remember thinking, because the backstory, listeners, is that when Angela approached me, I was completely overwhelmed. My inbox was overflowing and my kids are crying and I've got, all these pressures. And I said to you, look, I checked out your company because you were really nice. And you approached me in that really, friendly but professional manner, and you were giving me a compliment and I guess stroking my ego and all that kind of stuff. And I remember thinking, I want to talk to this woman, but right now I can't because there's just too much on. But that's why we're here today, because when things got, when things died down, you wrote back to me, you said, yeah, no worries, look, that would be amazing, blah, blah, blah. So there was that really kind of friendly, professional manner, whereas, some people approach me and they say, hey, here's my stuff, I need to be on your podcast, when can we do it? And that's it, and you just go, who the hell are you? It's like, I check out your stuff, yeah, even if it's good, maybe I don't even want to, deal with you because you're very abrupt and, you're kind of saying, I have to do this. So, yeah, that's all, again, common sense to me. Maybe it's not to everybody, but manners goes a long way, and just being nice, and like you said, reaching out to people with a common type of agenda is a smart move, I think.
Yeah, just make it all about them. I mean, I really think that's part of it, and to honestly just be genuine. Like I think anybody that meets me or talks to me, I don't think there's a doubt in anyone's mind that I am genuine. Like I think that's really important. If you're just doing these things, like all these things I've said, and but you still have your agenda buried right underneath the surface, and you're kind of faking your way through it. I think that's very, very easy to see through, versus if you just want to make another genuine human connection, and I've honestly made some of my best friends in this industry, just in general, just my best friends in general, through that kind of interaction. And it's kind of amazing, because it's like I never would have known them if one or the other of us had not done that. So, I mean, even beyond just whatever your initial kind of purpose might be for reaching out, I mean, it can, I don't want to say it can change your life, but it can change your life. I mean, I've had a lot of opportunities, personally and professionally, through those interactions that have just lasted years and years.
Yeah, absolutely. The same for me. And the other thing I'll just add too is that you've built a platform for your networking. So when you approach people, you can say, hey, I've got this PR firm, and I've built the podcast, and other people have blogs, and other people have YouTube channels or whatever it might be. So I think that's another little strategy for a listener too, to build a platform and to give somebody a reason to talk to you. I know that might sound selfish, but that's just how I see it sometimes.
No, I think you're right. It makes a huge difference to be able to kind of offer that.
For the artists, Angela, when is the time to reach out to a publicist? Sometimes I've heard that people, they think, I've written this great music, I just have to hand it over to a publicist and that's all I need to do. What's your take on that?
Yeah, not that. We start album campaigns 8 weeks ahead of the release date, which means that you need to be in touch at the very minimum 3 months before your album is getting released.
So you got to have your shit together, don't you?
Yes, you do. Yeah, well, it's important, right? Because you can't do anything in this industry if you're totally disorganized. So yeah, at least 3 months, preferably more than that, because most publicists, their rosters will fill up, and they don't want to. Most publicists, they don't start campaigns, for instance, on the same week because it's too hectic. So you really need to make sure that you're organized and getting in touch and planning. And it's a little bit more lenient for things like singles and videos, but you ideally always want to get in touch before, even for those things, because then you have the opportunity to set up an exclusive premiere. Versus if you say, hey, this has been out for a month, and then it's like there's only so much we can do, and that's not very much.
Mm-hmm. And you touched on this at the start of our interview, but what's it going to cost on average, say, CD launch campaign?
Every PR company will vary, but I would say plan for around $700 a month, unless you also have something like a major tour, and then it's going to end up being more. Mm-hmm. But yeah, plan for around $700 a month. And most companies, including ours, will require at least a 3 month, and that's because we have that 2 month lead time, and then we need a month after the album to continue to gather the press and everything. So that ends up being around $2,100, and that's US. And so yeah, that's kind of the minimum that you need. So you should. It's tough because you see a lot of bands that they know they need PR, but they've blown all their money in their recording phase. Yeah. So. And at that point, it's so sad because it's like you spent all this money and now nobody's going to hear it because you also have no idea how to promote yourself, which most artists just don't understand that. So yeah, please, artists, please budget in for that, because it's so important. And same thing for budgeting for merch and tours. All these things are so important.
Yeah. Are there other times, Angela, that you advise an independent artist not to go with the publicist yet and to do it yourself?
I think what it comes down to is like people hire publicists for one of two reasons, or both, which is either they don't have the time or they don't have the connections. So if you do have the time and you have the connections, then certainly you don't need to hire a publicist if you're willing to make those, that time investment, and if you feel confident in your connections.
No.
I think it's such an individual band by band basis. I mean, if you feel like the quality is there and you feel like your social media is good, I mean, all these things have to fall into place. Like, it's really tough for us if we have an artist, I mean, music quality aside, because, you're assuming if you're working with someone that they would have good quality. But if, like, for instance, your socials are a mess, then you're probably not, like, no publicist can help you, because a huge incentive for outlets to cover you is that they're going to have access to your audience. So it's okay to not have a huge social following, but you have to at least be active and engaging with your fans. Otherwise, it just doesn't really look that appealing to the outlets. So I would say really just, have that stuff in order. You don't need to be playing out a lot or be on tour or anything like that. But you do need to have the music. You do need to have things like your promo photos, your bio, your social media. All that stuff has to be in order before you even think about starting a PR campaign.
And I can imagine that you get bios and you read them and you go, oh, this is crap. I'm going to have to rewrite this, and press shots that look terrible. Does that happen all the time? I imagine it does.
It does, and it's the bios especially because I think artists just have a hard time writing about themselves.
Yep.
So I always kind of really, really encourage them, even if you can't hire a bio writer, maybe you should just ask your friend that knows the band well and is a good writer, because it's just always poorly written. And yeah, exactly. That's tough to work with.
Yeah.
Because that's kind of one of the bad. Same thing with the promo photos. If they're all kind of dark shots or they're all the side of your face, that's awful. It's just hard to work with.
Yeah, totally. I've got a couple of lectures that I give my students on writing bios. Have you got any quick hot tips that you can give anyone listening? Like that one, I think the first one you just gave is great. But if you're not good at writing or you don't know how to write about yourself, find someone who's good at writing to do it for you or with you. Other than that, do you have any other hot tips?
Yeah, definitely that one. It's okay to brag. In fact, it's probably preferable to brag. You want to highlight things like your accomplishments. That's the whole point, or that's part of the point, as well as identifying just something interesting and unique,
Yep. I like that.
Which I think, it's kind of the backbone. Like we send over this huge questionnaire when we do bios, which allows us to kind of look for themes over and over and get to know the artist in ways that if we just said, hey, tell us, they wouldn't do it. So again, maybe even going back to asking a friend, being like, hey, you watch us play live a lot. Like, what do you think when we play live? And then maybe they'll give you some description that you wouldn't have known otherwise. Or, what do you think when you listen to this album? And just kind of ask other people. If you insist on writing it yourself, then maybe ask other people for what they think of your music, your live show, things like that. And then take that and put it into the bio and make it something unique. And again, just really, really highlight your accomplishments. And I think bands get really afraid to compare themselves to other bands, but both the publicist and the blogger in me say you need to do that, because it's really helpful for writers. If you just say we're a rock band, what does that mean? But if you say we sound like, the 1975 or whatever, then I go, oh, I like the 1975, versus if you just say you're rock, and I'm like, well, I may or may not like you, and I don't have time to read your email. So, you know what I mean? But it's important, I think, to not be afraid. Comparing yourself to another band doesn't mean that you're not unique. It just means that, somebody has something to work with.
Yeah, that's right. And I always say to my students and clients that, your bio, that's your sales document. That's your professional introduction to the world. And I'm actually a big fan of doing artistic comparisons, because when someone knows nothing about you, if you can, describe your sound, because I think this is what I personally think. I think after reading a bio, the best thing that you need to be able to do is the reader has some kind of mental understanding of who you are and what you might sound like, that you've excited them, hopefully. Or if it's not what they're into, then that's okay too, because you're not going to appeal to them anyway. But the people that you're trying to appeal to, you're trying to write very descriptively, you know, what you sound like. And just while I'm on this rant, Angela, I hope you don't mind, but you know, I read a lot of young student bios, and they talk about, you know, Jimmy was in the band and he played drums, and then we kicked Jimmy out, and then we got Tommy in on the band and on the drums, and like, well, you know, no one cares that Jimmy's gone now if no one even knew who he was, unless he was someone, you know, super important. So little things like that.
Yeah, you're so right. I do actually read a lot. It's so funny you say that, because I do read a lot of bios that are like, you know, a 10-year history of the band. And it's like, okay, but who's in it? And then at the end, they forget to even say who's in it now and what they play. And it's like...
Yes. So, ladies and gentlemen, get your bios right. Angela, you also talked about the importance of socials. Do you think there's a more important social media than others? I mean, is Facebook the obvious one, or is it there's so much noise on Facebook now? What's your take on the social media and which ones that the artist should be focusing on?
I'm not partial to any one or the other. I think that the best advice, it's usually the advice that I hear given the most to, which is, you know, pick one or two that you're good at and focus in on them, which I think is very good advice. I would also say, you know, if one person's good at Facebook and one person's good at Instagram and one person's good at Twitter, that's okay. Like, everybody can do their own separate thing. It doesn't need to be one guy doing all of them. That's probably overwhelming. So no, I don't think that one is more important than the other. I think it's very important to have a presence on all of them, and I think you should be updating it at the very least once a week. At the absolute least, everything should be updated once a week, but that's really the minimum in my eyes. Yeah, I know it's hard to come up with content, but that's a whole nother can of worms.
yeah, absolutely. No, I've had a couple of clients that have really struggled with that, and also not seen the point, not listened to me, say, no, look, if I've got nothing to write about, I'm not just going to make shit up. And I'm like, well, you kind of have to. You have to try and allow people into your lives because you want to try and engage. That's the key word. And I love what you said too about, you know, if you're a band and your band is your business, you should be, you know, looking at the major ones. I would be saying, you know, hey, Mr. Drummer, you love playing with your video camera. Maybe you should be the YouTube guy. And, you know, Mr. Bass Player, you're always on your phone taking pictures. Maybe you should be the Instagram guy, and, you know, and Twitter and Facebook, and share the love like that. But not too many bands work that way in my experience, but I think that's a good way that you should be working if you could.
Yeah, you're supposed to be a team, so you need to act like a team.
Here's another one, Angela. I've spoken to quite a few publicists now, and they say one of the things that really frustrates them is an artist tries and does a DIY independent launch, and then they, you know, 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 10 weeks later, they realize that nothing really happened, or they didn't get the love they thought they would, and then they come back to the publicist. Does that hurt you? Does that annoy you? Does that make you think, well, it's hard to pick the ball up when the album's already 3 months old, or do you think that you actually can do that?
It just makes me sad, because I know that it's sad because they've poured their heart and soul into this and they just totally missed the mark on it. To be honest, no, there's not a lot you can really do at that point. I mean, if they have something like a music video, then that helps, you know, because then we can promote the music video and kind of promote the album on the back end of that. But after a certain point, and that certain point really is like within a couple weeks of the album being out, it's kind of like driving a car off the lot. Like, its value just instantly goes down. So that's why it's so important to start a campaign with a publicist in the proper time frame of 8 weeks beforehand, because when you come and you say our album's been out a month or 2 months or 6 months, I mean, if you have some new piece of content, there's a little bit we can do to kind of get a mention of the album sometimes, but the album will never be the focus again. I mean, you might get a feature here and there, but for the most part, its day is kind of over, which is sad. It has such a short lifespan.
Yep, totally. And it is one of the biggest mistakes I see artists do, particularly, you know, my students at my college or my clients. They put, like you said, their heart and soul into the music. They spend all the money on making the production amazing, and then they've run out of money, so they just want to rush it out. They go, we've got this, we've got to get it out now. So they, you know, do a shitty cover or a shitty mastering job, and then no marketing plan, no marketing strategy, and they just throw it out there thinking that the music's going to speak to the world alone and get them all the attention that they desire, and then it most often doesn't happen because there has been no strategy or marketing plan in place.
Yeah, it's a really sad and expensive reality check and mistake to learn from.
Yeah, and I always say, look, if you have spent all your money, but you do have this beautiful product with all these songs, maybe you just have to put it on ice and save a bit more money, I always think that an extra 6, 8, 10, 12 weeks isn't going to make that difference, because when you come out, you're going to have like the boxing analogy, you're going to throw this massive right and hopefully knock people out with the stuff. That's the idea, at least. I like that analogy.
Yeah, I like that one.
Okay, Angela, so we're coming to the end of the interview, and thank you again so much. I've really enjoyed talking to you, but I wanted to ask you, if you could go back when you were starting your PR firm again, and you woke up magically and we were in some kind of, world where that had happened, what advice would you give Angela starting all over again?
I would give the same advice that I gave earlier, which is to do an internship first.
Awesome.
Absolutely.
Okay. And Angela, is there any question that I didn't ask you or anything that I didn't cover that you think is important for anyone wanting to either become a publicist, or they're interested in becoming a publicist, or a musician or a songwriter or a band or a manager who wants to employ a publicist in the future? Is anything I didn't cover, you think?
You were pretty thorough. Your mention of management just sparked something in me, which is that management's another really, I'm not sure how anyone, I have like all the respect in the world for managers, because it just seems like an even more stressful job than being a publicist. And if you are going into management, I would say just be very cognizant of the fact that when you work with a publicist or anyone, they are your team member. I think managers get a lot of pressure from artists, and they can feel kind of like they have to overcompensate for it, and I've worked with some managers that have been terrible because of that pressure that they feel from the artists, which is usually unrealistic, and so it can make working together difficult. But yeah, I mean, in the end, it's a small industry too, so you really don't want to burn bridges with anyone. But no, you were pretty thorough. And like I said, if anyone has any questions, whether it's from the band end or aspiring publicists, they can feel free to reach out to me through email.
Awesome. And again, I'll put that stuff on the all my show notes. Okay, well, Angela Mastrogiacomo, I think I got that right. It's a great last name, from Muddy Paw PR. Thanks so much for talking with me, mate. It's been really cool connecting with you and hearing your story and hearing about your company and getting all that great advice from you. I really, really appreciate it, and I'm sure my listeners do as well.
Yes, thank you so much.
Okay, mate. Well, hopefully I get to meet you face-to-face sometime, and look forward to talking to you again soon.
Absolutely. Thank you. Have a good day.
Take care, mate. Well, what did you think, people? Angela Mastrogiacomo from Muddy Paw PR. What a cool woman, hey? And as I mentioned, I really enjoyed my chat with Angela, and I really do think that there's a lot of great education in this interview. And that, of course, is what this show's all about. Music business education from the people who are in the trenches and actually doing it for a living. Yes, you can and you should be reading the textbooks and studying it as much as possible, but there's nothing like hearing the facts direct from the mouths of the experts. So again, if you'd like to connect with Angela and her business, her address is Angela, Angela, at muddypawpr.com. That's MUDDYPAWPR.com. And of course, as usual, I'll put all that information into my show notes over at musicbusinessfacts.com. And by the way, if you'd like to take your learning on the subject of music publicity even further, there are a couple of other publicists that I have interviewed. Just recently on episode 97, I interviewed Stephen Green from SGC Media, so you can go back and check that one if you haven't heard that one. And then also way back in episode 22, I interviewed my mate Chris Marrick from Marrick Media. And again, I'll put those links to their episodes in the show notes over at musicbusinessfacts.com. Now, also during this episode with Angela, I spoke about a guy called Brian Tracy, and like I said, I'd link to some of his videos in the show notes. If you do get a chance, I do recommend that you search for Brian Tracy on either Google or particularly stuff on YouTube's good. I do find him very motivational, and I've also selected to put a couple of his videos into Angela's show notes over at musicbusinessfacts.com if you have the time or the desire to check it out. I linked to his lecture on personal time management, which I found really, really helpful. And I also linked to one of his lectures on success. But there's a whole heap of stuff in there. I like it. I think it's good. Go and check him out. It's very motivational, and let me know what you think. Hit me up at rodney@musicbusinessfacts.com or facebook.com/musicbusinessfacts. Yeah, let me know if it helps you and you like it, or if you think it's just overhyped American bullshit. Anyhow, if you're still listening, this coming Tuesday, December 6th, like I said at the start of the show, I'm going to be running my updated lecture on how to obtain sponsorships and endorsements. I've delivered this lecture many, many times, and every time I do, at least one person from the audience contacts me and thanks me because they've been able to take those strategies and hook up a great deal or do some kind of win-win scenario between themselves and a other business or a potential sponsorship deal or something like that. So I do recommend, if you've got the time, to come and join the lecture live. If you can't make it live, for everybody who registers, I'll also send you the replay. So again, if you'd like to register for that, it's musicbusinessfacts.net/sponsorship. And that's for my lecture on how to obtain sponsorships and endorsements. Okay, now my next podcast is going to be out soon, and it's with one of the biggest hitters in the Australian music scene right now. Very, very excited about that one, so keep an ear out for that. And until then, I'll leave you with today's quote, and this quote comes from model actress Jane Russell, who once said, "Publicity can be terrible, but only if you don't have any." Till next time, guys, keep setting those goals, keep working hard towards achieving them. This is Rodney Holder signing off from musicbusinessfacts.com. Take care.
You've been listening to the Music Business Facts podcast. For more essential music business tips and information, visit musicbusinessfacts.com.